Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on AI and surveillance. We're going to be looking at how AI is really affecting surveillance or changing surveillance in the market today. You know, what's real, what are we looking at in the coming years, things like that. So to start off with, we're not around a physical table, so I'm just going to go according to whoever is on my screen and go around like that. If you can just tell us who you are, the company you work for, and then sort of what you guys do in the surveillance market, specifically related to AI, but also how AI applies to your customers. So Gerhard, you're the first one on the screen, so do you want to kick off?
Yeah, I'm Gerhard. I'm from RSAI. We've been doing AI for 25 years now. Specific to surveillance, we have the Actify project product, as I call it now. We own a large portion of the retail market. We own a large portion of the residential and so forth market, and we're big on the malls. That's pretty much it. Yeah, that's it.
Cool. Okay, thanks. Jean-Vicente, you're next on the screen.
How's it, guys? I'm Jean, CTO and co-founder of Lighthouse. Lighthouse is a video intelligence platform comprised of three distinct products. One is a rules-based analytics engine that uses deep learning models to identify rule breaks. The second one is a cloud VMS. And the third one, which is currently our main claim to fame, is the Scout system, which are agentic operators that you can deploy to your control room that work alongside your operators to deal with and manage and triage alerts.
Cool, okay. Jasper.
Hi, Jasper Horrell, the founder and chief innovation officer at Deep Alert. Our business is focused in Southern Africa and in the UK, and a little bit in Europe and a little bit in Australia and New Zealand. We've been focused mostly in the security space, doing false alarm filtering is the main part of the business. Increasingly on top of that, there's more sophisticated use cases with suspicious behavior and PPE and all kinds of other rules, things coming in. We're also very actively working both internally in the business and with our customers on the next generation of agentic solutions, which are coming to the fore and really being enabled by the new wave of technology that's sweeping the world apace. So that's us.
Cool. And Dave.
Yeah, I'm Dave Keating. I'm one of the founders and the chief executive officer of Reframe. Reframe was born out of a company called Yellow Dog Software that's been in the market for about 30 years now. We have worked with inference systems, the previous generation of AI stuff, in my own capacity since the late 80s, early 90s, and more recently with specific algorithms in the financial services sector. We pivoted during COVID to try and create a true South African AI practice. I think everybody around the table knows that Africa is a very difficult environment, that a lot of first world solutions fail within this environment because they expect first world kind of norms, sophisticated users, sophisticated infrastructure, unlimited bandwidth, unlimited computing power, people paying dollars and all that kind of stuff. So what we're on a mission to achieve is a true African-based AI practice, not just a sales kind of arm that builds AI solutions within the African context. We pivoted to this during COVID, and because nobody was paying us to build the skills, we decided to do something useful for ourselves. And, you know, if you're in South Africa, you know that we have a security problem, and one of the solutions to that is CCTV. So we decided to take on some CCTV analytics. It was pretty successful in our own kind of scenarios. So we decided to build that as our first vertical industry that we tackled. As Jasper alluded to, there's a lot happening in the industry. It's moving very, very quickly. Computer vision is a really state-of-the-art kind of domain that everybody's looking at the moment. And obviously, people are looking to sweat their assets. So we do have a lot of agentic AI. As Jasper mentioned, we have an intrusion detection type of product that reduces false alerts, tries to be more accurate than competitors. more user-friendly and so on and so forth. But we're looking at some of the more, let's say, commercially viable use cases within this domain. So, for instance, a lot of motor dealers have got a lot of security cameras around the place, but they can be used in operational workflows for various other kind of solutions. A lot of people have got passive cameras that are sitting around the place that don't look for active threats, whether those be active from a criminal perspective or active from an environmental perspective. So things like fire detection, old age homes, people that are getting elderly, such as myself, start having falls and so on. The environment is ripe for change. And South Africa, being the challenging environment that it is, we believe that if you can prove your technology in this domain, and as Jasper alluded to, Deep Alert has been able to export their battle-hardened systems from South Africa to the rest of the world.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about the operations benefits as well. But let's start out by looking at autonomous AI agents, because that's all the rage. If you can't switch on a TV or open the internet without someone saying something about agents. How much of this is part of the AI hype that AI is going to take over the world kind of thing? And how much of it in your companies are you seeing that's delivering real value to customers? And at the same time, I think it's also important to ask, where do humans fit in? What is really autonomous from the AI side, and what role do humans play, and how do the human and AI integrate, if they integrate?
Can I inject something here as maybe a discussion point before we get into specifics, Andrew?
Sure.
I think it's important for us to kind of discuss what we see as AI. Especially in the security industry, it's notorious for people rebadging everything as contains AI, is AI, and all that kind of stuff. We're seeing some very clever people that are packaging very, very old technologies and then telling their customer base or telling their market segment that it's AI. We're seeing some very old camera technology that has been zooted up into Apple-style type of devices, and they focused on ease of use, and they focused on application UIs and all the rest of it. But the technology is old. The technology, motion detection's been around since the early CCTV systems, your tripwires and all that kind of stuff. They're not AI. We call that a bit of BS from our perspective, and if you're sitting and programming rules on your systems, it's not AI. If your system hasn't learned a skill in that regard, then it's not AI. So, I think there's a lot of education that's required, particularly in this vertical, regarding what is AI and what isn't AI. I think something to demystify it is, was your system programmed to do this, or did your system learn to do this? Or was your system rather taught to do this?
Okay.
Just out of left field, sorry.
No, that's a good point, I think. Anyone else want to comment on that?
I'll give it a go. I think everybody has slightly their own idea around this. Obviously, there's rules-based approaches, there's programmatic-based approaches, which we wouldn't regard as AI. Then there's deep learning models, which are difficult. They need to be programmed with data, and people start to talk about AI when they're applying deep learning models and things. And then there's the new wave of LLM kind of technology, which is really, I think everybody's now becoming well aware of that, and the kind of amazing things that can do. It seems to have very strong abilities to mimic reasoning or human reasoning, and also to even be sort of programmed in a very high level way with just prompts and voice and whatever to take autonomous kind of actions, or actions that seem autonomous. So all of that, I think people would say, is AI, and it sort of can be self-improving, and you can get systems that build on themselves and improve on themselves and learn, not only in terms of like the environment in which they're deployed, like a camera environment, which we're talking about here, but we can see in the rapid improvement in the pace at which these new models are coming out from those kind of big providers, that they're using AI to generate synthetic data to train the models, to improve the models, and it's just getting faster and better and better. So I don't think there's one definition for AI, but what we're increasingly seeing is very powerful technology being applied in ways where it can be very programmed in almost like a high level way of programming. There used to be an old joke back in the sort of academic areas, like the highest level of programming language is a PhD student. You tell your PhD student what you want and they go and do it. And AI is becoming a little bit like that. You can just prompt it now. Okay, write me a program to do this. I want a user interface to do that. I'm trying to connect to the system. And it really is starting to feel like that. The level of agentic stuff, I think we should maybe focus on that. What do we mean by agents versus like robotic process automation, which maybe could be like applied quite well in control room environments? Are we really applying a lot of kind of extra intelligence in decision making in the sort of agentic side, and how are we doing that cost effectively and efficiently? I mean, those are all kind of really key questions at this point. So yeah, I don't have an answer to what is AI, but there's machine learning and the stuff that looks like reasoning. I don't think any of it is sentient, but it appears almost to be so.
Gerhard, you wanted to?
Yeah, I've got to agree with Dave on the fact that the AI is a defined field. We have a lot of clients that are selling motion detection and clever motion detection as AI, and it's a big thorn in our side that we have to first educate the client, and then we have to move to AI. But AI is quite simple. If I can simplify it,
Please do.
it's anything that you get from the camera that you didn't put in the first place. Now we've found that some portions of our clients are stuck on things like human detection, car detection, and so forth, and that's machine learning, but it's not real AI. The actual AI sits with VLMs, with visual language models, where you get more than you put in, and sometimes the answer can be more complex than the question that you posed. So I would say AI is anything that you get from the camera that is more than you put in, and is definitely not rule-based. But having said that, we found that just like with Jean-Vicente, the guys they've stuck on the rules. No humans after 3 o'clock, and no cars after 4 o'clock, and all that kind of. So we've got a small portion that's still machine learning, but a larger portion has been VLMs, has been visual language models, and that is through AI. That's where you get more from a camera than you put in.
So I got up and I've got a bit of a different take there a little bit. I think I'm more aligned with Jasper in that I think there's a distinction between traditional computer vision techniques, which we've been doing since the 80s, deep learning techniques, which really exploded in the late 2010s, and then now with agentic AI. Each of them are different. Each of them have their own use cases, and each of them are valuable in their own right. I don't necessarily think that a rules-based engine means that there is no AI in the works. 10 years ago, we called deep learning AI. It was the field of AI. That's where all the research was doing, and it was respected as the field of AI. You know, you still have to train GPUs on millions of images on data sets. You have to hire data scientists to manage that and train that, and to identify if a man has his hands up or if a person is fighting. You could use a deep learning model to identify that for action recognition without it being an agentic solution or something like a VLM. And then you can still encode that with a rules-based engine. And the upside of that is you have a much lower cost basis compared to running a much larger model. So there's a place to use a traditional computer vision technique. You know, there are cameras where maybe all you need is motion detection. There's a place to use a deep learning-based approach, and then there's a place to use an agentic solution. And each of these things are their own solution with their own value propositions. And a lot of these things are under the umbrella of AI. Just within that umbrella, there are distinctions between machine learning, deep learning, and agentic AI, generative AI, these solutions.
Okay, let's focus then on the agentic AI, because that's what everyone's talking about. What is AI, an AI agent? I mean, it's from my perspective, and I mean, you guys are far more sort of technically expert at this kind of stuff, but It's supposedly when your computer or a computer or the cloud or wherever does something by itself without asking you, can we do this? Or it gives you information without you prompting it. Like Gerhard said, you get more out of the camera than you put in. So how would you define agentic AI, and how autonomous are they really, and how are they working currently? And if you want to look a year or two in the future, how will they work with humans, for example, in the control room where the human has to press the button to raise an alarm or something like that?
Well, I think that it very much needs to be a collaboration, particularly in such a high value kind of activity. We're talking about people's lives and all that kind of stuff. So from an autonomy perspective, the agents that we're building, they'll be autonomous because they will analyze video footage as it happens. But when there is something that is detected based on some rules, again, that are in there regarding thresholding and that kind of stuff, they will be referred to a human in the loop who must then make a judgment call on what to do with that output. I think the big gap here is the trust of these things, because I think everybody's mentioned here VLMs. Anybody can take a VLM now. The barrier to entry to do wonderful things is extremely low. So expect this environment to heat up, especially if you've got absolutely unlimited hardware and unlimited amounts of cash to throw at the problem. Right now, you can use frontier models that will do almost anything that we can think of doing. It's the cost effectiveness of this, and it's building the trust of those models. In our instance, we've seen that VLMs that are generalized to be able to do all kinds of different tasks, the transfer of knowledge in between, that's a person, therefore this is this. That generalization doesn't necessarily, in this domain, it doesn't translate very well. So what we're focusing in on is building agents that are potentially domain specific. So you might have something like a firearm detection type of agent that has that skill, that has been trained specifically with data in that domain. You might have an agent that specializes in old age things. And one of the things that we need to talk about, I believe, is you've got everybody that is on the other side of this as the users is saying, I want unusual behavior. What is unusual behavior? Unusual behavior is setting specific. We had a request the other day for unusual behavior in an old age home. What is unusual behavior in an old age home? It's to the specs that they gave us. Excuse my French. It's dogs crapping in environments that they shouldn't be. It's the purple rinse brigade in the swim without swimming caps on, and then it's old people moving quickly in the direction of the gate to abscond. I think the skills, yes, we have base models. So, for instance, layering of these models, where we take an onion style approach, where if you have an armory, for instance, everybody knows what an armory is, I presume. It's where you store weapons. If you have an armory and it happens to have a camera and it happens to be running an AI, and there are firearms that are visible to it, do you want it to notify every 2 seconds? I think the answer to that is clearly no. To Jean-Vincente's point about, a computer vision technique there says, if there's not a human in the room and there isn't a firearm that is within easily accessible distance to one of their limbs that they can use to utilize it, then is it really a threat? I think the answer to that is no. What we're looking at in our side of things is we're taking a layered approach, and ultimately the decision maker at the top of that layered approach is going to be an operator / analyst of some description. So we might be elevating the decision maker. At the moment, I think in most control rooms, you've got operators that sit there and go, okay, just ignore, and the alerts are coming so fast and furious that they're actually discarding genuine events. It's a big problem, as we all know. And, you're now putting a much smaller cognitive load onto them, but the decision level needs to be that much higher. So that's the approach that we're taking to it. And we're also, on the other side of that, we are also creating tools for those decision makers to use that will enhance their decision making, creating specialized agents for that.
Gerhard, you put your hand up.
I agree with Dave, except for a small percentage. The trusting is everything. Trusting the AI and trusting the results derived from the perspective of the camera. We found that with some of our sites, quite a large percentage of our sites, some of the alarms are trusted, like person detected, for instance, is trusted to the point where the AI can take steps, in this case, Maestro, can take steps without consulting a human. But for instance, facial is not trusted because it's such a loose biometric that you have to pass it by a human. So I agree with the trust thing, that trust is the key to it. As far as the agents go, depends on the agentic, whether you want to use the agents or not. By rule, about 90% of our sites are agentic. We've got special rules for firearms and so forth inside the Active Fire stable. But we found that the larger portion of the sites are run autonomously, and then the only humans are used for verification. When it's an algorithm that's not trusted, weapons being one of them. You don't always trust the weapons, especially not in the malls. But yeah, everything is weapon in the malls. But we found that it helps the humans, but it doesn't always help the humans. If it makes sense. I would say about 40% of our sites run completely autonomously. With the agentic, the agents actually run the sites, and the humans only intervene when there is really something to intervene with. But 60% is humans. We still have a human verifying the alarm, and in that case, Dave is correct. It's all about trust.
Can I ask a question there? How do you know how much you're missing if it's all being done with the agents?
We keep a log of every single detection, and we have them reviewed by humans, our own humans. And we've actually, on some of the detection, we've exceeded 99%. But we keep logs on everything. So even if the humans are not reacting to the alarm, we still have a person outside checking the alarm and the log to check if the detection is accurate or not.
I think one aspect of agents, which goes beyond the automation piece, is that the agentic operators and systems have the ability to get more and richer data, historical data, which can inform a decision beyond what an operator can do. And that's really quite an interesting angle on things, which might mean that you can eventually just do much better than a human operator because you've just got access to more data.
Okay, interesting.
That's a good point.
That's a good point. I think, so at Lighthouse, we've got a vision of what the control rooms of the future look like. And they look like super control rooms, mega control rooms, 10x the size of any of the control rooms that we've been engaging with today or have come from the past. And the responsibilities of those control rooms are also 10x greater. Where currently today they're focused on security, as that's the low-hanging fruit of the South African market. It's everyone's afraid of being killed. But as you expand into the businesses, we believe that the control rooms will act as intelligence hubs. And if you kind of assume this stance where the control rooms act as intelligence hubs for these businesses, for their clients, A, and then B, they are managing 10,000 cameras, 20,000 cameras alongside other sensors, then the thing that we're laser focused on right now is actually the operator experience and developing operator empathy. And we believe the distinction there between the operators and the agents is currently today, operators deal with 99% garbage alerts, right? 99.59s of what they review is a complete non-event. And the agents currently today can completely absorb those and free up that time from the operators. And that's the first step in getting the control from being able to manage 200, 300 cameras per operator to 2,000, 3,000. And then the next step beyond that is further automations and being able to have the agents take on more of the non-value providing roles that the operators currently fulfill. So then the tasks left to the human operators are exclusively the sensitive, mission critical operations, very similar to what Dave and Gerhard both said, especially Gerhard with these fully autonomous sites. Currently today, the operator landscape, Dave mentioned it, there aren't the most sophisticated users. And so the name of the game is making the system as easy to use as possible. In the future, I think these roles are going to become more sophisticated because they're going to absorb more responsibilities, because all of the cheap work is going to be done by the agents. And then, effectively every control room becomes a CIA station.
But then why do you see 10x the size of the control rooms? If we are looking at reducing, everybody's product here reduces those false alerts and makes things easier to do. I 100% agree that we should be elevating, and this is going to, in the security sector, this is a change management thing. And we're seeing real issues with it in certain of the clients, where you get somebody that is now concerned that they're going to lose their job because the agent is going to do it for them. And to be frank, we have seen sabotage happen in large deployments in large, well-known organizations where things that agents or things that the straightforward rule-based stuff has filtered out and has said it's irrelevant and whatever else have you. That's going to be a big barrier over here. But, if we're all heading towards dark computer rooms and only lighting things up when there is an event of real interest, I'd be interested to hear why you guys are seeing that going to 10 times the scale, because with all the VLMs and things that are happening now, the drive is to put it in the hands of the end user immediately. So if you're looking at value adds, non-security related, where something doesn't have to be dispatched, you're giving information to people. Let's take the example of a vehicle dealership. It's the guy on the floor that needs the information. It's not a control room. The control room can produce reports and whatever else have you of this vehicle came in at this time and it was in this kind of quality and so on and so forth, and it exited at this time. But the guy on the floor is the guy that needs to know what's going on with that. Whether it be, this is the make and model of the car, this is an estimate on repairs, this is the wheel alignment, with all the extra sensors that you're talking about. I don't see control rooms growing in magnitude.
Sure, I can address that. So I think currently the name of the game is increasing profitability. And the way that they're doing that is by maximizing the number of cameras per operator, by getting rid of the false alarms, by getting rid of the garbage. I think that's going to be the name of the game for the next 6-12 months. Beyond that, what this now enables is the scope of the control room can start expanding into the kinds of services that were previously effectively impossible for them to deliver. I'll take an example of doing shoplifting inside of a high foot traffic retail environment. A control room wouldn't really be able to offer that kind of a service to, let's say, retailer X. I don't want to necessarily name names, because the alert volumes would have been just far too high. That's going to change, where now the controllers, where an environment like that might have generated 10,000 alerts a day, is going to generate 100 alerts a day. We're getting similar results out of a retailer we're working with in Singapore. And so that now enables this control room to start offering those sorts of services. And I think the scope of the services that the control rooms can offer is going to continually expand, and then these agents will stop being used for loss minimization or profit margin maximization, and are going to start acting as revenue drivers for new streams of revenue. And then in terms of why wouldn't the end user do it themselves? Why wouldn't they become the end customer? I think they'll definitely be a part of the ecosystem. I think they're going to be a part of the process. But ultimately, from my experience working with the end user directly, they don't really care. They don't really care about maintaining and managing their CCTV systems. They don't really care about maintaining and managing the regular alerts that they get. And especially they don't want to be dealing with any false alarms. Like their false alarm tolerance is incredibly, incredibly low. And I think we're still a ways away from having a 0% false alarm rate. And so in that sense, the control rooms can now offer those services, and they act as the intelligence hub while dealing with the overflow that the end users don't want to be dealing with. There will be a portion of end users that are going to be happy to receive 10 alerts a day, let's say, onto their phone and then manage it on the fly. But as you scale that out, let's say you're a retailer and you've got 400 stores, 4,000 stores, 4,000 multiplied by 10 alerts per day, you're not going to want to receive any of that garbage. You're going to want someone else to deal with it and then only get the actionable insights out of that as a result, is our belief in the system. And then thirdly, the control rooms currently they're the seat of the expertise, right? They have all the market knowledge and domain knowledge, specifically when it comes to maintaining the infrastructure. They've got a lot of, they're the pros to migrate that knowledge over into every single end user across every single domain, across every single vertical. I think is going to be a much longer time horizon. Maybe it's sooner, maybe it's quicker if some very clever guy goes and builds a really cool product that makes it all a lot easier for everybody. But I don't see that happening within the next 5 years. And I see the control rooms blowing up a lot sooner than that.
Gerhard, you put your hand up earlier.
Yeah, I've got to agree and disagree. We've hit the barrier with security where clients are not buying us. About 60% of our clients, I checked in it and I'm able to verify the stat. The 60% of our clients have actually bought us now because we knocks and not security centers anymore. And for instance, example, one of our clients, it took him 2 weeks to count a specific item in their different warehouses. That takes 7 seconds, using our AI to get the same level of stock that that's manually in a few seconds. And it's reached a point where now they've first invested us because we were able to count the item. But secondly, they invested in us because of security. But security was sort of an outflow of the knock version of it. And we now, that's why I was laughing at the PPE thing. We're now checking the PPE, we're checking whether they're abusing the stock and all that kind of stuff. Even though it represents risks, these are not security risks. They are actually operational risk. So we found that. That's why I agree with Jean-Vicente, is that I think that most of our clients have now reached a point where they're buying us for the ops rather than the security. And security is such a small portion, it's 40% of our market, that we've all reached a point where the security has become secondary to the operation portion. And one of the part I disagree with someone, I'm sorry about this, is that the control rooms have shrunk. We currently takes about, I said, 8 people, including manager, to do the stock taking. And now takes one operator. And the operator doesn't need to be specially trained. You just need to take the number at the top, and the number at the bottom of the stock taking app, and give it to the guys. It's that simple.
I think I might have been a bit unclear. When I said that the control rooms would blow up, I didn't mean in terms of the operators. I meant in terms of the cameras in their portfolio.
That's just much. We've also not increased the cameras at all. We've used the existing camera. We've changed perspective on 2 of them. Perspective is always a weak spot of AI, but we've become more knock than SOC, and that's important.
What does NOC mean? Sorry, I'm a bit
National
ignorant.
Operations Center.
Okay.
Yeah. So we've stock taking and operations, and we do things like PPE and unhealthy practices and all that kind of stuff, which takes fair portion and sums up in 2 words. But it's most of our clients have stayed with us and bought us because of the knock. Of course, we can do more operationally than we do security-wise. And the security seems to be almost an outflow of the operations.
Sorry, so wouldn't that mean that your own control room then has grown? While the control rooms on site have shrunk as a result, your knock has absorbed them, and thus grown.
Not really. I actually I did the checking while we're busy talking. It was an interesting question to me. So I did the checking, and we actually reduced the knock by 2 operators.
But in terms of the cameras under your Knox portfolio.
No, it was still the client's control room. It seems to be one of the things is that they want to retain control of the cameras.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Jasper.
I'll also gaze into the crystal ball of control rooms and tell you what we're thinking. I think it's complex and there are different timeframes involved. And I think as Jean has been saying, for the next little while, this new technology really kind of supercharges what the control room can do. Some of them will be entrepreneurial and progressive and embrace that and almost develop new businesses, I think, and become maybe specialists in certain areas, in certain verticals, become really good at that. Ultimately, though, in the longer term, you can see that the value of this technology is actually for the end customer, be it a business or individual, and that they're going to want to get that value directly delivered to them, and that the technology piece in between is going to be able to make it easy enough for them to get the value and to configure it without, I mean, eventually the agents are going to take over all the tricky technical stuff of running these systems and checking health and all that sort of thing, configuring and connecting. So I think the long-term play for us is that the end, you're going to have some end customer offering, definitely to the end customer. Whether companies like ourselves, all of us here in the call, end up running like our own sort of version of a control room down the line is an interesting question. And I think a lot of control rooms are going to shrink and disappear, but a few of them will really embrace it strongly and grow and become almost like new businesses. So I think that's our view on it. So it's not like there's one answer to this. I think it's different things at different timescales and depending on the entrepreneurial nature of the business.
Okay, but what's going to happen to the operator? Dave, when he was talking about an operator or an analyst, and Gerhard was saying that the operator doesn't have to have special training. He just checks the numbers for stock taking, for example. But looking at it generally from security and operations and whatever, the AI can, or the agents can assist you with, are we going to reach a stage where the operators are reduced, the number of operators are reduced, but their skill level has to be higher? So, you'd be more of an analyst?
I think we have a moral obligation, all of us as providers in this domain. We're not first world countries where labor is super expensive and all the rest of it. We still need to provide jobs for the youth. We still need to provide all those kind of things, and it might take a different form. I've been experimenting with communities on doing micro tasks, where you could view something as simple as somebody viewing alerts. You could delegate that and you could syndicate that. So maybe you don't need a control room. Maybe you have a community that you qualify through technology to make decisions. I know that the security sector that we're in, where you're dealing with the small bucky brigade kind of operators, they're just looking at cutting staff numbers so that they're more profitable and all the rest of it. You start looking at more responsible corporate citizens, there's going to be big issues within those environments. And if it's not properly managed, we're going to have really serious implications of what it does to decimate that particular workforce. It doesn't make sense. If you look at in this country with Squirrel's whole drive for 4AI, education in 4AI, skills upliftment, all this kind of jazz, it's lip service at the moment. So, I think us as the kind of providers of these technologies, we need to be able to talk about the dark side of it.
Mm.
And we've seen that. We have seen people that have torpedoed initiatives because they have been in fear of their jobs. And what you typically find is you will not have a change management agent in any of these security response kind of organizations that will run a proper change management. And I mean, this is me talking from years of corporate experience, any change for anybody is scary. And, if somebody suddenly sees that a piece of software that they can, as Jasper said, go and put in a 2-line prompt and it can now basically do what I sit and do all day, then I've got shit coming my way. I'm not going to be able to put food on the table, all those kind of things. So we have the obligation of reskilling those people. I would prefer seeing reskill on an uplift kind of basis. The operators that sit in these control rooms, they are not fundamentally, they are not allowed to think for themselves at the current time. It's kind of, why didn't you dispatch when that alert came through? Okay, and there was actually an incident. They're fired on the spot. There's no tolerance for failure. There's no tolerance for learning. There's no tolerance for any of that kind of stuff. All the courses that they do, it's just, oh, Joe Schmo attended the course. It's no real effort at humanizing this whole thing and uplifting these people to the levels and educating them to the levels that they need to be. I'm pretty passionate about that, and we try and engage with some of these organizations on that and show them how they can be uplifted to higher value kind of tasks. But
Dave, what would those sort of tasks look like that you could train, let's say, the standard South African operator? What kind of training do you think is possible, and where could they add different value?
So I think certainly in the control room context, Jasper, I think, if you've got an easy enough annotation tool, you could have these guys, while they're sitting with black screens, they could be sitting and annotating data for all kinds of different uses. What ultimately I think, as this becomes more and more commoditized, I think that there's potential depending on the level of client that's on the other side. I mean, we know that people sit and argue with us over less than $100 a month. It's crazy. But if you could have a custom model for your site, depending on the LSM that you're selling that to, that might be a very attractive kind of offering. Now, who's going to sit and annotate all that data? I mean, we also know, as Gerhard alluded to, the context of a camera. You've got a camera that's on top of a pole and looks down at somebody's head, and you apply a model to that, and every football that comes past is a person. It's we all know that these challenges exist there. But Jasper, I think the key element is the level of education that these operators have had, and I'm talking about primary education. This is where our problem extends from. The primary education in this country has been raped. It's only the privileged who got through basic education and into high school, and then some people luckily enough to get to tertiary level of education. So we need to set the expectation with what can we do with them without having to build huge amounts of skill. I think if we build the right tools, by building the right tools, we can build job opportunities for these guys. Talking about maybe giving micro tasks to these guys, where you can have a control room anywhere in the world in an underprivileged environment, preferably in South Africa, because we are South Africans, where you can say to people, and I mean, we're talking here about deaf people, we're talking about retirees. I'm trying to do some job security for us later on.
No, I appreciate that.
So where you've got retirees who are sitting there, and maybe they're not sleeping well, maybe they're happy to log in and start doing a shift. And you build that trust level. So if you're an entry level kind of thing, which might be an adversarial bot that sits at the lowest level, that sits there and says, that wasn't an intrusion or whatever else it might be, you can build different levels of this pyramid. In essence, it's a pyramid where you're overseen by a level and another level and another level. where now the person at the top of the pyramid scheme will get fractional kind of payment from everybody that's below them, but they ultimately have proven themselves through moving up these levels of ranks. It's just a concept that I've been playing with. But if you have people doing the right change management in organizations and employing the correct people from the outset, what we tried to tell some of these guarding companies to do right at the beginning was move your armed guards who used to be on site. If they're capable, move them into the control room. They understand the dynamics of the sites. They understand the communication protocols with the feet on the street. They understand that in this particular warehouse, round that corner over there, there is a dark spot that doesn't have any coverage. Start saying to them, you can now start advising on a proper security assessment for this.
I think there's a broader problem, though, that the AI, as we're seeing now, is so powerful that any kind of job that involves like following a workflow is automated. Like
Sure.
literally in half an hour, you can automate that. And like with the tools these days, any job, actually, our kind of jobs, like sitting at a computer doing this sort of stuff, is also a threat.
Yes, sure.
Ironically. So and then we know guarding is going to be like robotic and drones. And so there's a big question for society, where do we take this technology and how do we adjust as humans to it in a broader sense? And, you can imagine call centers is a huge thing towards automation and a lot of jobs changing there. So it's everywhere. There's to be factories, robots. Yeah, there's a big challenge here. It's not just our industry. And we've got to be quite wise and creative about how we deploy this stuff and how we look after the people.
Sure.
Gerhard, you put your hand up there.
Yeah, I want to add to what the guy said, and the sense that the operator seems to be getting more clever with the AI than without it. And we found that the operators on both the client and our own operators are bloody marvelous, but the operators seem to be getting clever. They seem to be by themselves learning how to use AI and how to use the different kind of initiatives or prompts or alerts that the AI gives, to the point we've got some of the operators actually be clever and putting new stunts which we didn't think about on alarms and prompts that we have. So my summary is the operator is getting clever, and we have a policy. We will never ever cost somebody their jobs. We'll always find a way to repurpose that. I know you've seen that before, so Andrew, where we've found ways to repurpose the people. We will never ever get somebody fired. It's one of our basic principles. And so far in the last 10 years, it's been applied and it's stuck. Nobody's been fired yet. And then thirdly, I want to add that it's about the application of AI. It's possible to make it complex and then require complex operators to access it, or to dumb down, for want of a better word, the process to a point where a normal person can actually use the same report, can use the same prompt as they used to in the past. And we've become quite good at that. But as I speak to the guys around the table but a lot of AI results are still the same results. It's just given better, given faster than the operators used to use in the past. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Let's. Sorry, John. Did you want to add anything, or?
I think everyone pretty much hit the major beats. I really liked Dave's answer. I think the way that we're thinking about it at Lighthouse is again in line with the belief, the bet that we're making that as Jasper put it, the entrepreneurial control rooms are going to expand and swallow more and more of the market. We believe that the market is big enough that as these control rooms grow, you won't need to be letting go of operators. Just the responsibility of the operators will expand, right? Where they were dealing with movement alerts from whatever 400 cameras they manage, they're now dealing with shoplifting alerts, plus manufacturing issues, plus customer experience issues at a hospitality chain. They're receiving all of these sorts of alerts. And so the market size is actually going to expand, and the total number of alerts that they manage as an individual might be the same or progressively get less and less. But, our belief is that we'll be able to funnel, keep the control rooms the same size, so no one loses their job, just more cameras per operator by opening up new revenue streams. In the longer term horizon, Jasper makes a good point. I don't know if any of us have jobs. Like, I don't know if there are any jobs left, in, let's say, 10 years, everyone on this call included. In the next 3 years, I think, and what I liked about Dave's answer is the responsibilities of the agents are going to grow, and they're going to eat into the responsibilities of the operators. And that gives them that has the potential to give the opportunity to expand the responsibilities of the operators into more high leverage, high value things. But we have the challenge of the operators themselves not being highly educated, not being the most sophisticated users, not having the highest computer literacy. And so I think the responsibility is on us, exactly as Dave said, to provide the tooling to make it as easy to use as possible so that they can do big things in 1 or 2 clicks.
Cool. Okay. Gerhard already mentioned, going into operations, or his clients more buying the operations and then buying security as an add-on from their surveillance. From your guys' perspective, are operational things, whether it's like John was talking about shoplifting or stock taking or, falling down on a construction site or whatever the case may be, is that a big thing for you guys? Is it becoming as important as the traditional security, the intrusion or firearm detection, etc.?
Yeah, for us it definitely is, but it's in the infancy stages, because I think people are starting to see what some of these capabilities are. So I'll go back to my earlier point of detect unusual behavior for me. Unusual behavior, like you've got stock standard out of the box kind of behavior, like fighting or aggressive behavior and that kind of stuff. But, context is absolutely everything. There's also this perception amongst uneducated user communities that AI is infallible, of course. Mm-hmm. AI will produce exactly what they want, of course. Mm-hmm. And, it's not going to cost them anything more. Now, I think to the point earlier, we've all been operating in an extremely price-sensitive vertical. And what has distinguished the products that are in this forum today, what has distinguished them in essence from each other has been a price point. That's been a lot of what the squabble has been about. And it hasn't really benefited any of us. It's been, I'll change allegiances when you're giving me $5 a stream per month. I mean, it doesn't give you much loyalty either way. It doesn't make the business model sustainable and all that kind of jazz. I think what we're needing to see now is more of the disciplines around life cycle management. So it's requirements gathering. Somebody came and said the other day, can you survey my stockpile with a drone? Sure, can survey your stockpile with a drone. It needs to be 100% autonomous. Okay, what's your budget? 30 grand. You can go and get a DJI drone. Shut. Go and get a DJI drone. It's not going to be autonomous because it doesn't have a dock. It doesn't have that. And you start explaining this to them, and they see a proof of concept costing them 250,000, 300,000 rand. And then the conversation stops. Why can't my nephew, who's an 8-year-old at school, did this for me, blah, 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 So I think there is going to be an implosion at some stage where people are going to realize. I think if you look at the Gartner, the hype life cycle, I think we have hit the trough of despair in certain instances, and we are starting to go up the slope of enlightenment. But for some people, there's still this imagination that AI is going to do absolutely everything for them. Not at the price points that they want. That's a fact. some of the elevated use cases that you're looking at. So, I mean, we're all in the game of analyzing images. So if you analyze an image that comes from a CCTV camera, it should be translatable to an X-ray machine, to a satellite image, to wherever else it might be. And there's some fat cats that have had niche products in those kind of zones, for instance, in mining, to do surveying and assess yield and all that kind of stuff. If I was them, I'd be worried about the startup who can deliver something in 6 months that they're sitting on 50 years of IP about. Those are the kind of things that you're also going to be getting all these personal things. Like you've all looked at this Clawbot and Maltbot and whatever. I mean, it's all bullshit as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it's nice enough for personal use, but to really run your business off those kind of things, if you are a serious business, is not going to get there. So I think we need to look at those higher value kind of things where we can elevate the people that operate it. Currently, we can elevate them to more fulfilling, higher paying, better scenarios.
Cool. Anyone else want to talk about the operation side of things? Gerhard.
Yeah, okay, like I said, portion is operations. We have found that the operations side, especially education part that Dave alluded to, the education part is becoming quite important. Cameras is no longer the premise of only the security guys. It's now the premise of the operations guys. The operation people are finding more and more ways to leverage the surveillance. And it's playing to our warehouse, of course, but it's becoming more prevalent that security is not the big ask anymore. It's the operations. And drones is one of those points. We seem to have a lot of drone projects, but the operations, it's the operations, to answer your question.
And how do you address, I mean, what Dave said there about whatever ChatGTP or Claw or whatever? People do assume that if I have AI, then it's going to be 100% correct all the time, and just tell AI to do this and submit it to the auditor kind of thing. How do we sort of find a middle ground between the trust, which we mentioned earlier, the trusting the AI and knowing when, it's hallucinating or whatever that's wrong, or whatever you want to call it?
I'll have a bit of a go with that. I think there's a problematic expectation in the market that you can deliver 100% accuracy at a very low cost, and it should be possible. People forget, though, that our environment is one of shades of gray with different camera qualities and lighting and things that go on, network glitches and all sorts of things that happen. And so it's very hard to deliver a 100% system. In fact, it's not even possible. However, what you can maybe offer customers is different levels of cost, saying, okay, if you want a system that's going to get almost everything right, and that this system can be 100%, then we can configure it this way, and there's certain kind of on-site devices, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to get a lot more data from your system. It's a lot more bandwidth, and the cost is X. And we can deliver that kind of service. If you want to do something that is more affordable, then the accuracy will be a little bit lower. Still good, but lower. There will be a few things missed, or nuisance alerts will be a larger number of nuisance alerts, but it gets it down to a cost range that people can afford. At the moment, there's like an unrealistic expectation, at least with some of our customers, that everything must be perfect, and you're going to charge, $1 a month for that.
Small spec.
And it just doesn't make sense. It's not possible to deliver that. So it only leads to frustrations and difficulties.
We found that educating the client seems to help a lot when it comes to AI and the results from AI. But we have hit the same problem when it comes to price point. You expect the AI to be cheap as opposed to the solution that provides. It actually provides an expensive solution, but you can't charge a lot to get the same solution. And most of the time, it's applying AI to existing cameras, existing data sets. And that is a problem. Because the clients tend to ask for a new solution, but they want to use old technology to do so. And that tends to be a problem for us. Education helps, but not on all the cases. Not all the cases.
And how do you guys go to market? I suppose this is a question for each one of you individually. Do you work through, resellers or security companies, or like the armed response companies, or do you sort of offer estates, remote control rooms, or how do you've got all this technology, and as you say, it's not cheap to get the stuff together and to get the stuff working. How do you go to market and get your stuff out there among people who can actually understand what you're doing and value what you're providing?
We follow Jasper on LinkedIn and then go to the place.
What's my philosophical musings?
No, that's being facetious. What we did try to do when we initially started, we built the system initially for ourselves. And we did try and push into communities. We had a huge community initiative in one of the suburbs around here, where we ended up having people putting public space cameras and all the rest of it. But dealing with homeowners and communities, people refused to offer power. People refused to offer bandwidth. We went as far as designing our own aerial so we could create a mesh network, all that kind of stuff. And it's a thankless job. And as Jasper said, $1, they were looking at more like R1. And they wanted you up in, every time something was missed, it was, they'd be outside the gate with pitchforks and whatever else have you in the night. So we are now purely B2B. The mainstay of our offering is still the intrusion detection side of things. But we are looking at, as I said, we're building an AI practice. So we're grounded in the security vertical, but, I do think that in the domains that require a lot more governance and that kind of stuff, we have 30 years experience in that domain. And those are the kind of things that we're looking at. There's some really simple applications using existing CCTV infrastructure, things like queue management and that kind of stuff. But I don't know if any of you have ever worked for any of the banks or insurers or any of those guys. It's, when you eventually do get the contract and it's a 6-month contract and they get paid 10 million for it, that's all hunky-dory. It's not the same as having 5,000 camera streams getting paid 5,000 Rand a month to run them. So it's risk reward kind of thing. But what we are seeing is that POPIA, GDPR, all these kind of things are starting to come into play. Bigger players want disaster recovery in those kind of scenarios. So you need to build for those kind of scenarios. And we're looking at having proven in this domain and having transportable IP. As I said, if you can analyze an image, you're capable of analyzing a document. We've still got and I've worked within, and we've done work for all the major banks and all the major insurers in this country. And I can tell you for free, they all still have exactly the same problems with document management because they use first world systems that nobody here knows how to properly support, customize, and all that kind of jazz. So we're trying to build our moat here within the African context, and that's one of our big things, is that we are local. You can pick up the phone, you can come and see, feel, hear, touch, have a beer with. We're your local mom and pop, but not really mom and pop.
We tend to sell B2B to suppliers. Most, I would say about 70% is suppliers, and 30% would be local owner-active people buying or selling the product. But most of the time, it's we leveraging the relationship that the supplier has. with the client. As far as price goes, we've created a pricing model and we stuck to it. Initially, it causes a bit of resistance because clients don't like the fact that we have a fixed price. But at the end of the day, the market forces you towards a certain kind of way of selling. And whether you like it or not, you have to stick to that model. So we've got a fixed model for pricing, both Actify and Snapcard, and we've got a fixed method that we use against our suppliers. So far, it's been working for us. I would say 30%, like I said, is our own people. The rest is all externals.
Cool. I can jump in there as well, just what we're doing at Lighthouse. It's again in service of and I hope we're right about this, but it's in service of the vision of the large control rooms. What we're specifically doing is we've got a very targeted approach on who we want to bring on as customers. We don't want all 9,000 control rooms in the country to necessarily be on Lighthouse. A lot of them are, as Dave called them, the bucket brigade guys, who I think are very, very dangerous to the market today.
Yeah,
Very dangerous to the market. We want the 100 or 200 or 300 control rooms worldwide that can handle the world's cameras. And we want to grow with them and grow them into those kinds of organizations. And so what we really focus on doing is just identifying the control rooms that care, that really, really care about their service delivery, that really, really care about their clients and really, really care about the operator efficiency and the operator experience, and work with them on developing into this vision of these super control rooms. Then as for the end users, we do have some distribution partners who do go after the end users, and that ends up acting as a distribution funnel for these control room partners of ours. You know, some of the guys are happy to manage and monitor it themselves, but from what we found, a lot of the times they want the insights, but they don't want to do the work of it. You know, you still need the human in the loop, and that's where the control rooms come into the frame. So that's kind of our approach there.
Cool. Okay.
All right, and on our side, we've also focused B2B, definitely the control room market. We've been quite broad across the control room market, from the very biggest players to even the small ones. We see nice growth from those customers, which is nice from the sales perspective, because you're not selling a new project every time. So very good growth from a lot of them. We are busy formulating and developing new strategies for kind of channel strategies into different ways to get out into the market, and also into different verticals and whatever. So there's a very sort of active part of our business now, which is focused on the commercial strategy and how that's moving forward. So I think from us, B2B control rooms is the main part of our business at the moment. We started to see the sort of operational use cases and things coming in through those existing customers, and particularly just some of them are more progressive than others, and there's opportunities there. And we're actively working on kind of new ways and a new strategy for what the future will bring.
Okay, last question to everyone again. Let's say it's Christmas 2028. What are we going to be seeing happening in terms of AI and agents and everything in your businesses that you're going to be providing to your partners and customers and what have you?
Well, I can tell you what we did in Christmas 2025. We got lots of fire detections by agents in one of the big casinos because of Christmas decorations. You know, I think we're going to see a lot of new use cases. I do think that we're going to have niched agents where they're going to be controlled by an orchestrator, where you're going to be capable of saying, I want this camera to look for safety threats. I want this camera to look for violence threats. I want this camera to see if somebody's smoking. I want this camera all in one to do all these things. So you're going to be picking up the guy that's holding a gun to the other guy's head while he's having a pee against the wall and having a smoke, and you're going to get all that intelligence in one alert. I think that's where we're going to be.
Cool. Jasper?
Okay, so I think things are going to move really fast. I'm just seeing it everywhere with this AI, that the tools are so powerful and you can move so quickly with them, and they're building on themselves. So I'm predicting in 2 years' time, there will be very different offerings, almost fully accurate, informed, agentic offerings for a wide variety of use cases. The control room market would have changed completely by then, I think, or yeah, I'm expecting a lot of change, expecting some strong offerings to end user clients, more businesses than individuals. And I'm expecting our internal operations within Deep Alert to be very automated, very agentic, small teams doing a lot. So yeah, I think it's going to be a very different look company and market by then.
Wow. Okay. Gerhard?
I seem to have taken the wind out of my sails, but most of the time, I would say that we would find more uses for the agents, and in 2 years' time, we will probably reach a point where the agents are running the sites and the operators are acting as verification to agents. So the agents will get more autonomous, the agents will get smarter, we might be able to do more, but also use humans as verification. That's that's about it.
Okay, Jean.
I think within 2 years, we would have seen the first 2 or 3 of these super control rooms, a control room with 10 to 15,000 cameras managed by 3 to 4 operator stations. For the end sites, I think it's going to be honestly magical experience where the entire building or the entire facility is managed by these agentic these agents. So you'll have a really seamless magical experience walking through them. And then one thing I'd like to almost hazard the market in general is I think over the next 2 years, we're going to see a massive rise in, I want to say, bucket brigade of video analytics providers. Exactly as Jasper mentioned, the rate at which we can move now is insurmountably faster. And so the rate at which someone can take a bad idea to market is a lot greater. And I think we're going to see a lot more providers spring up from the woodwork. And I think a lot of guys are going to get their fingers burnt because those new providers don't really have the domain experience. They haven't gone through the pains of what does it actually mean to keep a camera online in the middle of nowhere through thick and through thin. And then what does it mean to develop the operator experiences to manage these, high risk and critical events. So I think the next 2 years are going to look absolutely nothing like any of the years that we've gone through in the history of this industry.
Wow. Okay. That's quite exciting and also quite frightening. So
I think it's both. Yeah.
Can I just tell you something? I mean, I was involved in the first iteration of the AI getting commercialized, and that was with inference engines in the late 80s, early 90s. We did some projects for the Department of Justice and all that kind of stuff. And I've had quite an in-depth technical career, and I'm 61, and I'm enjoying my job now more than I ever have.
That is true.
The rates that you can move at, the agility of teams, what small man teams can do. I come from a small man team kind of background, but what small man teams can do, and women for that matter, before I get into trouble, what they can do with the bare minimum is absolutely phenomenal. And I don't see a retirement date on the horizon. Unless we get that whole pyramid scheme working.
Dave, I think we need people like you in the market and staying active to do this stuff with good morals and with responsibility and helping bring AI in the right way.
So Jasper, I'll give you there's no names, no pack drill. And it's part of where my grounding in this came from. In the 80s, I used to go into the townships and I used to educate on computer concepts, it was kind of frowned upon by the general community and all the rest of it, but we'd get kind of smuggled in and we'd go and we'd give talks on simple, pragmatic kind of concepts.
That's really
And
cool.
there was nothing available to educate these people on. You had to do everything. Like, I mean, maybe somebody in the room still remembers when we used to work with punch cards and that kind of stuff. So everything was done at the desk. And that's where some people think the DES algorithm came from, but didn't. What I saw within that environment was ultimately the corporates started hiring out of that pool of talent. And what the corporates then did is they wouldn't trust those people. They wouldn't elevate those people. Then the behaviors of those people, because they were brought in as the new cohort of students and all that kind of stuff, and suddenly somebody would start monitoring the PABX activity. And they would see that these people, because they weren't being trusted with anything that was productive, they found themselves in an office where they'd never had access to a telephone, where they'd never had access to any of these things, and they could pick up the telephone and they could phone their mates. Now, nobody had said to them, this is how you work in a working environment. And I took that as a personal kind of challenge, and I still do this. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to give something back into this environment, particularly in the tech domain, because it is a force multiplier, and it is something that especially with the entrepreneurial spirit, you can get people, especially in this country, to build businesses from this. So that's just where my background and where I come from. So I do think that we do need a lot more passion. We've seen the corporate raiders come here with their first world products. We've seen them disarm local, and the corporates having no soul in this environment. They don't back the small little local guy that's around the corner from them. They don't do that. They'd say, well, the old concept, if you buy IBM, you can't be fired. I think some of you might have been around in those days. We're still stuck in those kind of narrow-minded kind of times. I think a shining example of what is possible these days, I'm sure everybody knows Community Wolf by now. That's essentially a two-man dev team. They're 14 months into building their platform. They've acquired Namola, and all the people with legacy technology, sorry for you. Although that is something, we are going to see a big dump of technology from China again in the near future, where everything's going to come in at entry level, and they're trying to head us off at the hills. We all know that. They're trying to create these closed loop systems where you have to buy their cloud kind of subscription from them, and so on and so forth. So there's some really interesting times ahead. And if we had a government that would put some rules in place and actually enforce them, we'd be better off. But governance is coming.
Cool. We were out of time, so unless anyone wants to add anything, thank you very much. I really appreciate all the input you gave us today. It's been very interesting. Like I said, very exciting and frightening at the same time. But thank you. I appreciate it. And yeah, we'll do this again in 2 years and see what we have to say then, if we're around, or AI will do this in 2 years.
Great.